Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, and thank you all for being here. This is actually the first webinar I've done for PMP. I've been working for them for over 2.5, I think, or so years now, but we just started expanding and doing some of these things. So thank you for being here for the flagship journey for me on the webinars. So today we'll be talking about the divine feminine. Primarily coming to something that I call the mother of all, or the united feminine. It's something that came through, well, it's been coming through for a while, but kind of came to a crux, I guess you would say, with a diet that I did recently with Tulsi, who really brought through kind of the framework of this whole thing. So thanks for Tulsi as well for bringing this all together. So first off, what do we mean by the divine feminine? I would assume that most of you being here have some idea or what you like to think of as the feminine. But basically, it's the feminine aspect of divine power and energy. This can mean a lot of different things to different people, but usually associated with the earth, with the womb, and thereby also birth and death, and also then rebirth as well, which is going to be kind of a theme for a lot of this as well. Um, Also, creative energy, when you're talking about birth, creative energy in general can definitely be associated with various goddesses. And the rising of the Kundalini, which is our creative energy. So, again, makes sense that those are all related. Um, and the thing I think about, oh my God, let some more people in here. Let's let everybody in. Oh, there we go. Where was I? Oh, is that we kind of see it as having almost two sides, this sort of light and dark, that it can be both this soft mothering energy and also a fierce sort of protective warrior goddess. Um, and sort of, you hear people talk about the maiden mother and the crone too. There's these different aspects that come through it. So what I would like to highlight is what we've kind of been, I don't know if programmed is the right word, but the sort of way that we've culturally come to see the light feminine is focusing more on that nurturing, soft, kind of mothering side of the feminine, this compassionate kind of gentleness and grace that comes through with her. Whereas the dark feminine being seen more as that shadow side, the death, the warrior goddess, being associated with kind of reaching out for your own needs, like empowerment, which interestingly enough, we'll get into why that's kind of considered darkness, even though I don't think that it is. Transformation also can be associated with the underworld and sort of traveling between worlds and portals and things. I think also comes through with a lot of those kinds of goddesses that have a little bit of what we refer to, at least, as the dark element. But I think that the light feminine can also have a dark side where maybe as an example you have this really compassionate mother energy, but sometimes that goes too far and you can overmother and give too much of yourself and it becomes disempowering, which then that's seen like as the dark. But in the dark feminine, that boundaries that it takes to keep that from happening can also be seen as being selfish when really it's not. So either side kind of has, like, the light side has that element of darkness to it as well. There's kind of a shadow there that's within it. And the dark side also has the light side. It's still that mother energy, and there's a power there that we are kind of taught to suppress. Um, so we will talk about that as well, and why. Often has to do with the same thing that we think a lot of things have to do with: capitalism, toxic patriarchy, and colonialism, and kind of pushing down some of the cultures that recognize the feminine in its fullness. Okay, so I have all my notes here. So just some kind of examples of the feminine. Obviously, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of different goddesses and divine feminine beings that are recognized around the world. So I'm just going to highlight a few that I have basically been working with over the well, forever, but some particularly in the last couple of years or so. Um, one of the main ones is Mother Mary. And again, you know, I remember growing up in the church as a kid, I grew up Protestant, and her not being recognized. And when she was, it was just for basically for being the mother of Jesus, that there wasn't much else spoken about her. It actually confused me when I went to a Catholic church with a friend where they actually kind of like at least recognized her a bit more. I'm like, I don't understand what's happening here. But now, at this point, having gone through, especially some of the diets that I had with Rose, she kind of brought through a lot of the what more there is to Mary. That she's not just that, that she was actually a really high level adept in a long-standing tradition in which the women were actually in some of the most powerful positions, that they had a really big place in those traditions. So she wasn't just some random girl that they picked out to be the mother of the Christ child. She's also the queen of the angels. And I think, again, that power has kind of been taken away from her in a lot of ways in the way that she's often seen. And she is soft and loving and compassionate, but she's also an incredible healer. You think about all the grottos around the world with the holy water, where people go to and they spend hours in line to get into this water or have just take a little bit of it home. And people have massive healings that were just unexplainable, that she's got a really incredibly power in that way. Um, and I'll get into her a little bit more later too, because I've got some stories about her. Um, I'm going to kind of just go through some of these briefly, I think, here too. Um, Also, Isis, which sometimes is seen as almost being very similar to Mary. I've heard a couple of people even kind of say they're like the same being. And they do have similarities in that they have, they were the mother of a sort of divine or godlike child. There's resurrection and rebirth that is involved in both of their stories. Ice is very much being associated not only with rebirth, but I think also transformation. And she's got multiple forms, including the kite hawk, which I think is one of my favorite forms that she comes in, seeing her in that form on the temple walls. One of my absolute favorites, I know the few of you on here that I see that I know already will know this one, is Kali Ma, and definitely one that is really misunderstood by a lot of people, especially I think in the West. I know when I first came across her, I think I was like a teenager. I remember instantly being magnetized to these pictures and something about this being, but she seemed so fierce, and it was like almost kind of scary to be drawn to her, because of just the way that she's depicted. And she is a warrior goddess, but she's also an aspect of Shakti. So she is a mother goddess and she has that energy within her as well. And I know recently, even though, like, she drinks bloods and kills demons, I ended up working with her on a diet with Rose. And I'll tell that whole story a little bit later. But one of the things she told me, because I had read that in the Hindu tradition that she's actually considered the most compassionate goddess, that she's the goddess of space and time. And as such, she becomes really important, I think, to this conversation because as the goddess of space and time, she's beyond duality. And so she isn't pulled by those kinds of judgments. And therefore, yes, fierce love. And she can, because she is in that space where she's not drawn into the judgments that we have because of our connections to different things within duality that we feel like we understand, at least, she can be truly compassionate. She can act from a place that is just pure compassion from that space of unity with all that is in the universe. Whatever is actually in the highest good is able to come through her. So she can kill demons in an act to protect her children. And she is really, really special in that way. Like I say, we'll talk about her a little bit more later as well. What else do we have here? Lakshmi, which I had to bring in because she's so associated with Tulsi as well. So she's a Hindu goddess of wealth and prosperity. love and beauty. She's got the same powers, though, as Vishnu, which I think is really interesting, which is in preserving and restoring the order of the universe. So she really has this ability that is also reflected in Tulsi of having this sense of balance, which again, I think becomes really powerful when we're talking about this balance that happens in the feminine once we really start to understand the light and the dark sides of that. Um, I know at least one of you here will love this one, Aphrodite, who is the goddess, I see you giggling, goddess of love and fertility and beauty. She's associated with the sea. Um, One of the things about her I find very interesting is so often I think being a goddess of beauty, she is looked at for her physical beauty, but that really she has a beauty well beyond that in all of the capacities that beauty can be and all that it can bring in and all that it can share. Um, so she's kind of painted in this way that almost is reflective in a way of what women in, again, kind of a patriarchal capitalist society are expected to be good for, like the things that we are worthy of, being a mother and being beautiful and being, worthy of being a partner, but not so much seen as what she is in herself. And I think that is actually really where a lot of the power of working with her comes from. Yep, Sage knows. That is really the essence of what she actually has to share with us, is what we are really like meant to be and what we are good for, that it's a lot more than that. There's a lot more about us that is beautiful and wonderful and to be shared in this world, even though those things are also great. It's great to be mothering and all the rest of that, but um yeah, so taking her out of that box and kind of putting her into her rightful place. Okay, so the last one I'm going to talk about individually is one that's really, really special to me and has become a really, really dear ally for me. And I think a lot of that, again, has to do with exactly what we're talking about. And this is the Black Madonna. Some say that she's simply Mary with dark skin, or you'll see some websites that say like certain paintings just got ash or something on them. But again, that's kind of hiding the deeper story beneath her. She's way more than that. She's actually emergence of the light and the dark feminine, and really brings in this unity of the feminine that we're discussing today. That she has, I kind of see her, and again, I'll kind of tell my story about this a little bit here later, but she's almost a mergence of Mother Mary and Kali Ma, that she takes both sides of that energy and kind of brings it all together, and everything is welcome. That it's not that you have to be light or that you have to love your dark, that you can love the whole thing and that all things are welcome, which I think really connects to the fact that she has been sort of welcomed into a lot of sort of indigenous traditions that are being oppressed by things like the Catholic Church going in and forcing itself upon people, and they start to like see Mary almost as a way to worship their own goddesses, but kind of like outwardly protect themselves by seeing it in that form. And the Black Madonna has stepped in a lot of ways to really kind of be this. I'm trying to think of the words let me see what I wrote here. Oh, that they held on to their indigenous faith basically by worshiping the Black Madonna. They were able to hold on to their own traditions a little more and protect themselves. That she was a protector to them in that way. Um, and in unifying this dark and light feminine, it's kind of a radical act of reclaiming the power of the divine feminine. And she's really kind of a warrior for those who are oppressed and abused, and the way that she stepped in history in this way, I think, is a really big example of that, that she just takes everyone under her wing. And I think, again, because she is that really united sense of all aspects of the feminine, that everyone and everything is welcome, that she's able to kind of pull all of that together and really help a lot of people that needed to be kind of held and loved in that way. Um, what else do we have here? Okay. All right. So my story with primarily this would be Mother Mary, Kalima, and Black Madonna, because they are probably sort of my three main goddesses that I work with, while there are others for sure. And there's kind of a whole story that again kind of links to me getting to the point with the Black Madonna and the union here. Like I said, I grew up in a Protestant church and didn't understand Mary at first. And then I remember doing a meditation and it was like, get to know your spirit guides. And she was like, boom, the first one that came in. And I'm like, what? Where did this come from? I didn't understand because I didn't understand who she was. It didn't make sense to me why she was such an important guide for me. And I think rather than the Black Madonna coming directly in, that this was kind of like a way that she could come through what I already knew and sort of start that process. Um, but I started to learn about Mary beyond that sort of false narrative that we're given about her. Like she just woke up in the night one time and was suddenly told that she was having the Christ child, when really she knew it her entire life, that she knew that she was born for that. She was born into a tradition. Her mother was in the same tradition. So was Mary Magdalene, who's another one that we could talk about at some point. And she, I think, just being such a high level adept and being the queen of the angels, it almost feels to me like she is like I mean, she is an ascended master, but an ascended master that incarnated. And what am I getting at? Oh, that she, as the queen of the angels too, is also a demon slayer. So, you talk about Kali Ma being a demon slayer, and here's this light goddess that is also has that quality. She's actually the first being that they call in when the Catholic priests do exorcisms, that she's got this just power to kind of push all of that out of the way and exorcise it. Um, and it was kind of the same with Callie. Like I said, when I first saw her, I didn't understand her, but I was really drawn to her as well, just like Mary. I love the warrior goddess nature of her, and I just could feel that there was more beyond that. Um, so when I tied with her, I actually really realized the power that she has and the power of that warrior goddess. Um, so to make a long story short, I had done a few diets where I was becoming very aware of a blockage that I had in my throat. And even through a few of these diets and different plants kind of giving me different ways to work with that, it was kind of coming out, but just not completely removing itself. So I was doing a diet with Rose and Kalima, and probably at least a week before the diet opened, I just started getting really, really sick and sicker and sicker and sicker. And I was actually wondering if I was even going to be able to open the diet. And finally, after getting into a fever for a few days, I came out a little bit enough that I was like, okay, we can open this diet and we'll see what happens. And I sit with Hape right before Kat was about to open this diet for me. And I'm sitting with Hape. I spit this whole mass without getting disgusting out into my spit cup. And it was like I knew that she just took it out, that she just had that power to just use those Kali swords and pull that directly out of my throat, what I had been working on for a couple of years to try to get rid of. Um, so she's an incredible, powerful being. And it was just a really amazing experience having her do that. And that was the beginning, the beginning of that diet. So needless to say, she had some things to share beyond that as well. But where are we? Okay, I think I already kind of covered that too. Yeah, that she can also just really take these actions of whatever is in our highest good, that of that pure kind of love and compassion that can come through her, through having both that compassion and the fierceness combined into one being. And seeing that that same thing was also happening with Mary, I started to really be like, wow, these feel like almost like they're the same, even though we see them and we depict them completely differently in our world outwardly, that there was something about them that started to feel like they were really kind of the same. Um, like that I was working with two beings, but really the same one. So that's where the Black Madonna, like I said, came in and showed that she was not only a mergence of the two, but also an awareness of the mergence of the two. That it isn't just her that is the mergence of the dark and the light feminine, that she would reflect that inside of myself, that I was emergence of the light and the dark feminine, that I had these light aspects of the feminine and the dark aspects of the feminine. And then I also had the dark shadow of the light feminine and the light of the dark feminine all coming together, and that was within me. Um, and it's all just divine, that every aspect of that is divine. And I think that one thing that is really amazing about the Black Madonna in that way too, bringing that together, is that it really helps to erase this distortion that we've had kind of indoctrinated into us through, again, our culture, through the patriarchy and capitalism and oppression and so forth. Um, and just a lot of the religious traditions that we've grown up with that have had distortions through time. It just happens with anything like that. Something steps from a spirituality, and through thousands of years, obviously things are going to get changed and distorted. Um, so now I can really feel like it doesn't even matter which one of them I'm working with. That if I'm working with Mary, it feels like I'm also working with Callie and the Black Madonna, because I am. Or if I'm working with Callie, I can feel the energy of all three of them together, because they feel more and more like this one united energy that comes through, that it's this really the united feminine coming all together and not working with so much aspects of it as the whole force. And it really kind of shifts things to not have to see it in such compartments like that, to really be able to work with something in its fullness. It's like us feeling like we're more in our fullness, because it's actually reflecting that to us too. That when we are able to be with all of those aspects of ourselves and be in that fullness, that it can really shift the way that we show up in the world. Um, And I think part of that too, she told me at one point when I was dieting her that a rainbow isn't a rainbow without all of its colors, which I thought was a pretty interesting and pretty way to share that. Um, yeah. Oh, and also, I think one of the things that's interesting about the way that the Black Madonna has worked with me in seeing a lot of this is also starting to see how the way that we see the feminine now is reflected in the world as this two separate aspects of it, and one that is completely shunned away from, that we're not allowed to appreciate certain sides and aspects of the feminine. But that as that is coming together and more people, like I would assume most of you are starting to really accept all of those aspects of the feminine, and that the empowerment is allowed to be there, that that's accepted and loved and really stepped into. um, that it kind of helps to, when you're seeing it in the whole world and that everyone is like that, there's not a need for oppression, because you see that in other people as well, that they're a reflection of the same thing that's happening in you, and they're just trying to find that wholeness. And it kind of takes this division that we even feel between each other, and it brings that kind of motherly love to other people that we're finding for ourselves, to hope that they also find that same type of wholeness within them. Okay. So, how to realize the mother of all. Um, so again, it's a bit of a process. So it's not something necessarily that happens overnight. It was took a number of diets and ceremonies and all sorts of personal work and things for me to kind of come to where this was coming to this point where it's kind of feeling more holistic and embodied. Um, Again, I have to thank Tulsi for bringing this in, because she is the one that first of all brought the title in and the framework for all of this. So the plants are definitely a way to start. Um, let's see here. Touch on that. Okay. So I kind of have a little exercise, and I'll explain it This is recorded, so if you need to kind of go back, if you can't like write as fast as I'm talking, if you want to, or whatever, then it'll be recorded here for you. Um, so it's basically a version of some of the, for those of you that were at the goddess retreat last few months ago, it's kind of a version of that, but you need a few people to be able to do what we were doing. So it's kind of a way that you can do it on your own. The first part would be to write out all your beliefs about the light feminine and what you feel the light feminine is and what she represents to you. And then do the same for the dark feminine and what you think the dark feminine is. What is the shadow side of the feminine? The parts of her that are shunned away and kind of looked at as being sort of dark, sometimes even evil. I've even seen some of the goddesses almost called demonic. Um, and then kind of take both of those lists and compare them and see what is actually the same. Where are the actual differences, and where did those differences kind of stem from? Is it something that's actually there in the feminine, or is this something that you've been kind of trained to think about the feminine in a certain way, about the light or the dark? And do you see aspects of the light in the dark feminine and vice versa? Are there aspects of the dark in the light feminine, things that are shadowy if it's taken too far and to an extreme? And when you start to really look at those things in a deep way, you start to really see that there isn't a whole lot of difference, that there's just seeing aspects of that wholeness. I'm trying to say unity, I think, and wholeness at one time. Um, and then I think once you really start to sink into that, then it's when you can really start to then look at it within yourself. And where do you see a light feminine in yourself? What aspects of your self show up in ways that you would call a light feminine? What is your light feminine? And then reverse it. And again, see what is your darkness as far as the feminine is concerned. What aspects of you do you feel have been shunned or are dark and unwanted or whatever it might be? And then compare those lists. And is there a separation then in that between you? Because you are one person. Is that really two separate aspects? Or is it one sort of energy that lives within you that's really one unified thing? And then again, how that may have been influenced by capitalism, colonialism, religious upbringing, even just aspects of whatever culture you grow up in, can really kind of affect the way that we're looking at those things and then keep us from being able to see that that's really all one kind of energy within us. You can also, if you want to keep going with it, do it with the outer world. How do you see the light and the dark feminine within nature and the world around us? You can really actually apply it to almost anything and really kind of dig into it if you really want to feel into what you're thinking about the light feminine and the dark feminine and how they overlap when you're comparing how you see them in different ways in the world. Um, but I think when we're really looking at how we see them in the world, and it can really expand the way that we see how the feminine in general has been oppressed throughout time and how that has affected all of us individually and all of us collectively. And if that's the case, then seeing and recognizing her in her fullness and that unity again can also have the potential to bring that back into the world as well into us as individuals. So that I think is the real power of the mother of all. Okay. I think I just got through that. Okay, I think that is most of that. So I would maybe just go through a few ways that you can connect to the divine feminine. For those of you, I would assume many of you that work with plants, a lot of the same kind of things can help to connect to them. going into nature and connecting to the earth, especially because the earth is the divine feminine in so many ways. And she has that powerful feminine energy, really calling on the spirits of the land and being out in the wilderness, even if you're just going out into your yard or whatever little patch of grass you're able to get to, just being outside can really be helpful. And just like plants, I know I tell people this with diets all the time when we're doing master plants diets, that just calling to them is enough. If you just call on the divine feminine, that it can come in to be with you, especially when you set a really strong intention and a prayer for that to happen. Um, if you call them, they will come, and they will come to assist you with whatever you ask for. Providing an offering can definitely be also helpful. Just having that reciprocity, whether it's putting something on your altar or lighting a candle. I know when we do diet, sometimes I say to set your intentions by writing a love letter to the plant. There's no reason you couldn't do that for a goddess. It would be a really sweet way to connect with them too, and ask them to tell you more about all of themselves, and not just what you've been taught about them. That they love that invitation because it has been hidden for so long, that at least in my experience with the ones that I've been working with, when you ask them to tell you about themselves beyond just what you might find in the traditions themselves, that at least the parts of the traditions that exist, because sometimes parts of them have been hidden, just like the Nag Hammadi scrolls coming out and really revealing so much about the ancient Gnostic traditions that were kind of the pre-Christian traditions, changing a whole lot, especially what we thought about Mary Magdalene. Um, but so much of it is just hidden still, that we don't know it. So when you actually welcome them to tell their whole story, they're really excited to do so, and it's amazing to just give them that opportunity to connect with you and tell their story. um yeah, and I think even just working with things that are associated with them, like working with Hecate and maybe doing it under a full moon because she's associated with the moon. Or if you are working with Aphrodite and if you have access to being at the ocean, since she's associated with the sea, that would be great. But maybe you have a seashell or a little bit of sand or something like that that you can put on your altar. Those kinds of things can also just be an act to represent you welcoming them to come work with you. And lastly, I think calling in the divine feminine within yourself is a really amazing way to connect with it, to really, even if you're sitting in a meditation or whatever you might be, to meditate on her and welcome that energy within you to work with you. And even better, to welcome her to reflect outwardly into the world again, because this needs to be shared. And we're really needing to bring in this kind of reclamation of what the feminine actually is, if we really want to shift this world into a balance again. Because it's not like we want to damn the masculine. The masculine is just out of line too, and I'm sure we could do a whole webinar on that as well. But bringing the feminine into this united way and bringing her fullness back into our culture and society is definitely something that I think is really, really important, and could help us have a massive shift in the way a lot of things are being handled. Okay. I think the last part I have here then, before we get into some questions, if anybody has them, is the plants that help support connecting to the divine feminine. You said a lot of this has come through for me through some of the plants, um, and through different diets that I've done, though you don't have to be dieting them for them to help share wisdom either. They also readily share anything when asked. But of course, Rose. I mean, she's my number one ally. So I'm sure, again, all of you on here that I do know are knowing that she's going to be a big part of this. Um, and she's the queen of unity and duality. So, of course, she's going to understand how that works and be able to share a lot about really digging into both sides of the feminine within us. She's definitely, I know I joke about people saying sometimes you go into a diet with her and you're like, oh, she's going to work with self-love. And yeah, self-love might show up as like, oh, I'm going to take lots of baths and brush my hair and just dress up all pretty. And sometimes it comes through that way. But sometimes for her to show you self-love, she's going to take you into the shadows of everything you're doing to not love yourself. And that's the part that sometimes is surprising for people with her, that she can really take you into whatever aspect that you need in order to really feel that alignment with your feminine and loving yourself and all the things that the feminine does for us. Um, she is also really good at holding space for both softness and fierceness. Again, that kind of duality and bringing it together, sometimes at the same time. And I think that's reflective of the fact that she's got that softness in the petals and that beauty that comes forth. And it's easy to forget that she's got those thorns underneath it. I actually call her Kali swords, where she's very welcome to teach us about boundaries and everything else that we really need to do, empowerment, and total goddess energy. If there's a plant out there that has goddess energy, it is most definitely Rose. She's the highest vibrational flower on the planet, so she definitely carries that goddess crown on her flower. Uh, Cacao. Again, so the first time that I dieted cacao, I felt like the first week or two, it was just burning things down and burning things down and burning things down. And I was like, there can't be anything left to burn until she finally, there was one day I was like, what is this? It's quiet. That complete and utter destruction of everything that I was holding on to that I should not have been had kind of seemed to stop. And then I realized she had taken me into the ashes, like that I was just totally burned down. And she said, this is where you needed to go to be the ashes that nourish the earth for you to be reborn. And since that rebirth is such a part of the feminine, it made complete sense that that had to happen for that rebirth to happen. So she definitely has a really powerful ability to kind of push us to that point if that's where we're at and where we're ready to be. Also, definitely a heart opener. And she's so supportive for the body, full of minerals and vitamin, and can really help us to bring that vitality back to our system and to our body. And has that motherly sweetness, but like I said, is also really able to push us where we need to go in order to grow. Damiana. Damiana is the one that I dieted with the Black Madonna. And they were a really lovely pair. And so Damiana connects us to all of our senses, both physical and extrasensory. Um, so also really kind of connecting you to that body and how we perceive things. Um, so again, can be connected to this whole thing. She ushers in a deeper connection with intimacy, sexual energy, vulnerability, which in turn connects us to our power and our gifts. So again, kind of as holding the two sides of that. She's absolutely aces at healing trauma, especially sexual trauma, but any kind of trauma that you're dealing with and really kind of coming to it in a different way and perceiving it in a new way. She also holds space for acceptance of all aspects of ourselves, including the entirety of our femininity. Um, she is just a very wonderful, wonderful plant. I can't say enough about her. Of course, I have to mention Tulsi, Holy Basil, especially since she is the force behind creating this whole webinar. She's a master of balance. So again, bringing this sort of unity and balance into ourselves and finding unity in both in ourselves and in our daily lives. She also helps to really balance and align all of our body systems together so that your body can completely work in balance and harmony, and as well as all the chakras, because she's a crown chakra plant. So she can really align all of our chakras and keep all of that energy flowing in balance, which then just brings balance into our lives. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that she really helped me to get to a point where this balance between these aspects of the feminine really started to come into unity and working together. And she also brings in a lot of clarity. So again, it was really, I think, in her wheelhouse to help kind of make all of this become really clear and understood. Okay, I think we got, oh yes. And of course, we cannot forget ayahuasca. who is better at diving into both the darkness and the light than ayahuasca. I'm sure many of you have probably had some experience with her and know that she has a lot of capabilities in both of those realms. Um, and of course, deep mother energy, not afraid of death or going through rebirth experiences. Um, she is herself a portal and can go to other dimensions. So you want to talk about the feminine being able to guide us through the underworld and different portals and working in the dream state too. Um, and I mean, she loves us as we come. She's a warrior goddess for sure, and really helps people to transform and transmute things in their lives. So she is definitely one that we have to mention here. Uh, okay, I think that is the core, at least of what I had written out to share. I have some other little things if we want to go over anything, but before we get into questions, I just want to make sure that I remember to tell everybody that the first 5 people, if anybody wants to do coaching or a diet or anything else with me, the first 5 people will get 20% off of that service. So that is available to the first 5 of you that would like to do it. So if anybody else then has any questions, you can go ahead and probably raising your Zoom hand would be the easiest. Or you can put it in chat if you want to, however is easiest for you. Or anything you want to share too, if you have experiences with any of these goddesses or something you'd like to bring into the space, that's also welcome. Sage.
I just actually really loved that, Lindsay, because it just kind of brought forward so much of that lived experience, around, well, especially, with my experience with Aphrodite and just experiencing all those other feminine energies. And it's so interesting too, how um, when you said about doing that practice, and asking those questions, it's like you could do that almost. I'm thinking, oh wow, I just experienced, allowing myself to be that we call dark feminine by setting my boundaries, or, and saying this is the way I'd like it. And then it's like we get it's almost like we get told that we're like, oh, you got armor on, and what's your problem? It's like it's not it's a dark, shadowy thing instead of a power thing, So what you were saying earlier around that. So I just found that was a really powerful little piece. And I also love the idea about the love letters and that kind of communication. That's a really cool idea. I like that you gave us those practices. So I didn't really have any question. I just wanted to say that I really that was really, and the other piece that I thought was really powerful, which I never really thought about, and I'd love to know more about too, is the Black Madonna, and how the merging of, it's almost like the merging of Mother Mary and Kali, and I can really see that, like it's like, yeah, that merging and bringing it into that one. It's like that Trinity consciousness from the feminine. I don't know. I'd love to hear more about that too at some point.
Yeah, it almost has that element of like the triple goddess in a way, where you're seeing kind of the two sides and it comes together in one. But when you see them as one, you realize that neither side kind of almost exists, that they are one whole between the 3 of them. Because when you're seeing one side of the other, you're not seeing the whole thing, essentially. So, like, and a lot of it again has to do with what we're kind of indoctrinated to see these things as, that Mary was also a demon slayer, just like Kali Ma, and that Kali Ma is also an aspect of the mother goddess, just like Mary is. That there's really not ever a separation. It's just the way that, especially that we live in duality, that we kind of view things as these 2 separate things. But then the beauty of that goddess is that joining in the middle, that really is that it's not separate, that the boundaries are light, that it's something that's necessary for your self love, that if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else.
Yeah. And it actually makes sense though, that if you look at the patriarchal construct, how the patriarch would almost like want us to see all kind of fragments and separate, because then it feeds that separateness rather than seeing that power of the multifaceted, multidimensional being that we are. It's much easier if we're all little pieces.
Right.
Then we don't have any power and we don't do anything, you know?
Well, and I think that's exactly why the Black Madonna is so important to so many people who have been severely oppressed or abused or held down in any way like that, that she is just a force for people like that, because she kind of brings all of that power back in, that joining of the two sides and being like, no, this is all one big force. And I mean, that's probably the force that some of the things controlling this planet right now are the most afraid of, which is why it is suppressed in that way, like you said. That when we start to bring, again, why I think that really working with the unified feminine can have a massive shift on not only us individually, but on everyone, the entire collective, and our world and the way we treat the earth. So thank you, Sage. Regan.
I feel like we kind of have been talking about it a little bit, but at the beginning of the call, you were talking about, the the light and the shadow, and that the shadow actually has a light side and the dark and the light has a dark side. And it's kind of what we're talking about, like it's all one and the same.
Mhm.
But I didn't know if you could like give examples or talk a little bit more about those aspects. So like, compassion and grace are the light sides of the divine feminine. So like, yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head more around those pieces.
I think if you, especially when the aspects of one side or the other get taken to an extreme without the balance of the other side. So, like, again, if you have so much compassion, but you don't have those boundaries, it's just going to drain your energy. Or if you are having such strong boundaries and you're like this whole warrior that just wants to destroy everything without that love and compassion, then that's also out of balance. That when you kind of are pulling both of those things together, it's that unification of keeping it in balance that really makes the power come together and really makes that loving, compassionate side of it come forth in a balanced way. I think it's really more about the balance of the two, that when it gets so far out of balance on one side or the other, that it can, that's where it sort of starts to be the dark side of the light, especially. And that we forget the light side of the dark, that there are things about the dark feminine that are really essential for us as human beings, if that helps. All right. Sam.
Hey, Lindsay.
Hey.
I always feel like the dunce of the plant class, but how how do you describe experiencing a plant as masculine or feminine? Because I feel like when I think of masculine and feminine, it's just in terms of estrogen and testosterone and the characteristics, like a deep voice is more masculine, a higher voice is feminine. Or in terms of a goddess, like besides the feminine form, it would be like giving birth is a feminine goddess. But say with Wachuma or tobacco, I wouldn't, I don't know that I would describe those as masculine, except people told me, oh, those are masculine. And with ayahuasca, people told me that's feminine. So I envision a figure that goes with that. But I feel like I would have no idea what's masculine or feminine plant without being told.
Well, I mean, first of all, really, the plants don't have a masculine or feminine. It's something that I think is kind of what we perceive them as. So it can depend on what your concept of masculine and feminine are. Um, I would say in general that most of the masculine plants, what really distinguishes them for me is I usually feel really held. Like the masculine holds space and holds that container that kind of moves and holds the feminine, whereas the feminine is kind of like it's emotional and all the energy that sort of flows and moves and has that wild kind of movement that the masculine kind of holds. um I mean, I think some of it too, like sometimes there are plants that, I mean, I know right now I'm dieting mistletoe and they come through as a they. Sometimes it feels masculine and sometimes it feels feminine. So you even have that kind of thing. And I think it really just depends on, I mean, even how you feel them. I know there are certain plants that I even have seen, like traditionally, like say example for sage. Most people that I know at least feel white sage is a feminine plant. But I know when I was reading about her years ago, um, I came across something where a lot of the tribes in the Southwest United States see sage as masculine. They call it a he. And that could just be something in their culture that they perceive it that way. It's just something that kind of, I think, depends on a personal thing. So if you feel a plant as something different when somebody else says that's not a problem at all. They don't care. They're not going to get mad at you or anything like that. Yeah, I think that's kind of the main thing is at least for me personally, it's like there's always this really sense of almost like a hug from a dad, at least if you have a good relationship with your dad, that I feel from a masculine plant. Um, and they just have this really kind of just protective essence that holds you in a way that whatever you're working on can kind of, you feel safe inside and held to do that. Whereas the feminine plants seem like it's a more when things are kind of moving, it's emotions moving and things like that. And although the masculine plants to me feel more like outward action, like if I was really trying to like build something in my life, that I might lean more on a masculine plant. Whereas if I'm contemplating the ideas and just sort of trying to like work the feelings out around it, then it might be something more feminine that I want to work with, if that makes any sense or helps.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can think of exceptions
Mm-hmm.
to everything. Like Reagan was there when we had a cold pressed Wachuma last November, and that was fits with the feminine description you said. If it was like very sedative and inward and such. So where the Wachuma is typically more energizing and active. So yeah, even one plant, it seems, can express itself different ways.
Absolutely. And just the way that we work with them can change things too. I think that they, again, it's a construct that's coming from us. So if we perceive them differently, like I don't think um, they're not trying to necessarily come through as one or the other. It's something that we just kind of perceive them as.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Elisa. Hi. You want to go, Allie? There we go.
Hi, hello. And I would like to say thank you for doing this program tonight. It's amazing conversation. And I would like to ask you about the goddess of love, Aphrodite.
Mhm.
And the jasmine is very present on her island. And it's a place where is her house, and it's calling Aphrodite bath. And the legends say the myth, when you wash in your face, you stay forever young. I wash my face, but I still 50. And it's lots of jasmine around her house. And it's okay to diet Aphrodite with jasmine.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, I know there's been a few plants that I've seen people diet Aphrodite with. So if it feels like it's something that's coming in and it feels aligned in that way, then I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work. Especially if
Okay.
it's around you like that that's calling. Um, and I mean, aren't you on the island of love? Or you don't know if you're still,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that feels very fitting where you're residing to be dieting a goddess like Aphrodite, especially with something like jasmine, sure.
Okay. And another question is, which of the goddess show you more the dark side of the feminine?
I mean, any of the dark goddesses could, by nature of being more kind of dark, but since I kind of don't really see as separation in that, that I think kind of the way that Rose is able to show you something to bring, say, your light or your love for yourself forth in a way that's really soft or in a way that's really fierce, that I'm sure any of them have that capacity because they're not, there really isn't a light goddess or a dark goddess if you're really going to look at it from a unified perspective. So it
Mhm.
just depends on what exactly you're working with. If there's like an aspect of that darkness that you might want to see what seems to feel aligned, or just ask, put the kind of prayer out and see who shows up. Let's start
Okay.
popping, just like the plants, like how sometimes when you're about to diet, they start popping up all over the place, or you see them everywhere, or people start talking about it around you. It's the same thing with goddesses. They'll come in when they're needed.
Mhm. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, I couldn't
No,
figure out
that's
where to raise my hand, so I went. Um, but I was just gonna what just came up for me was around when you're saying about which goddesses and stuff. And sometimes I find it, I totally agree that it could be any. And at the same time, it's like if we look at wherever you are on the globe, like for me being in Northern Ontario, well, not Northern Ontario, Southern Ontario, but it's like, it's winter and it's the energy in the time of the north, which on the wheel is a lot to do with the crone and the elders. And so it's like working with Hecate because of the season, you know, and it's kind of like looking at what season and then what aspect of the goddess that you want to work with. That always works for me, is to do it that way. Or you could work with anybody, like you say, I really love that too, but that was just one piece that I thought Hecate just popped in my head when she was talking. So I'm like, yeah, you know, it's like because Hecate is the old crone and now is the dreaming time, you know, now is the time to go within. And so those are the aspects that we've been taught. So they carry that archetypal energy within like in the collective, right? So they're more prominent or whatever. Anyway, that was just something I wanted to add on top of that if I could. So
And you're aligning with the earth that way too.
yeah, exactly. The cycles of the seasons and yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I could see how that, bringing that in would be a really great aspect to it too.
And if I could just sort of add, there was a question on chat. Amanda had asked something about Jesus and about the divine feminine and what plant with the aspect of Jesus.
Um, I don't know about a plant with Jesus per se. I mean, I know that he was very much a part, obviously, of the same. There's more. Um, the same tradition, obviously, that Mary was, and obviously being her son. But I mean, so was John the Baptist. Maybe let me see if I can feel into something. Maybe there are plants if you dug into some of the Gnostic texts, especially, or in a more um, older maybe version of the Bible that might have something in there. Even the new ones, I mean, things are still in there. Just because it's been kind of distorted doesn't mean that there aren't those pieces that you need. But I mean, there's tons of plants in the Bible that they work with. So maybe something in there might help to find that. Um, or I mean, any of these plants I think that really work with the nervous system too can really, you're bringing your body into balance in that way. Maybe even something like passion flower, which at least to me again kind of comes in as both masculine and feminine, and having kind of a plant that holds that unity in itself could be beneficial. I know mistletoe has definitely very much been that way, because not only does he come through as masculine and feminine depending on the time, but he grows in a tree. And I know Sage knows this well right now. Grows in a tree, but he doesn't have roots. He actually attaches to the tree, and a lot of times he was seen as parasitic, but he's not, because the trees that he grows on flourish. So there's something symbiotic about the way that he works with the tree. So a plant like that has that ability to work with kind of harmony and being in a symbiotic relationship, if you're really thinking about working with the masculine and feminine in that way, could definitely be really beneficial, because he's been really amazing. We've had an amazing group diet with them this last couple of weeks. So yes, mistletoe. Yeah, and I know I think Mountain Rose has it. I know I had bought some on Etsy and I got some then on Mountain Rose, I believe, also. Um, so yeah, you can just get tea. I've seen tinctures and stuff too. Um, so yeah, mistletoe is really, really amazing for that. Just so much harmony and balance. He's been really, really just, and again, this time of year kind of coming in where it's, and that festive energy sort of he has to, it's like celebrating the symbiotic nature of everything. It's not even just like, oh, here it is and you get to feel it. It's like this real celebration of finding that kind of balance and just joy coming through from that. Anybody else have any questions or anything you'd like to share while we're still here? Brittany.
Hi, Lindsay. Oh, I'm not sure what happened with my camera. Can you guys hear me? Okay, there you go. I'm actually more curious about, you had mentioned the diet with Damiana, and how did you do that?
So I did it at we did the women's retreat. I think it was what, September, where everybody dieted a plant and a goddess. It was all women. It was the first one we've done domestically in quite a while. Um, but she's definitely one that's safe enough for the body for sure. That if you wanted to do even like a one-on-one master plant diet, you can completely do her at home, for sure.
In a tincture or like a tea or
Use the tea. I mean, you could use the tincture as well. I like to use the tea because I like to have the just sort of closest thing to the plant material.
right?
But I had also bought a spagyric, which really kind of, I think, pulls the spirit of the plant out. And I know Courtney's laughing as we had those spagyric parties with Damiana. Um, but that's really nice, coupled as like an additive with the tea because it really brings her energy and spirit in as well in a kind of a different way. It has like a almost like an alchemical kind of action that they use to create them. It's a whole process, so I'm not sure I could explain the entire process of how they make it, but if you get a good one, that can bring that energy in and that vibration. Um, so I would definitely still do like your tea twice a day. Um, but getting something like a spagyric or a tincture added to it for sure would be a nice.
What was the word besides tincture that you're saying? My volume is like awful.
Put it in the chat. It's called a spagyric. Um, it's similar to a tincture in that it's kind of like an extract, but there's literally a whole alchemical process that they use to make it.
Wow.
I'm trying to remember. Let me see if I can pull the website. It's like Sophia something is the one that I had gotten some things from. And then the one that I actually have, again, I just got it off of Etsy.
Wow.
Um, Here we go. Natura Sophia Spagyrics.com.
Thank you.
Let's see. Another question here.
Thank you so much.
Salts from the plant. Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a few different processes maybe that different people use, but it's been really lovely. I have another one that I got for a diet we have coming up too. So they really have been a fun way to kind of add something different in to just the tea. Yeah, but Damiana is just wonderful. So highly, highly recommend her. Anybody else? Any questions or anything you want to share?
Hello.
Hi, Serena.
Hi. I'm actually traveling, so my phone has switched over to safe driving mode. So
Okay.
the video has disappeared. I was trying to figure it out. I thought I was totally gone. I just have a question. Do you know anything regarding any connection to Snapdragon specifically, as to like, I kind of feel like it would be more of a feminine plant, but like you guys spoke of earlier, we don't really know for sure. And just kind of base it off how we feel about them. But also like any goddesses tied into that specific plant as well, or like any info?
I don't know. I've never worked with snap. I mean, I've grown it in the garden just because they're gorgeous, but I've never worked with them in that kind of way, in any sort of medicinal or sort of spiritual realm kind of way. I don't see any reason which they would be. I mean, there's definitely an energy there. I don't know that I don't know.
Okay. I actually, I'll try to keep the story short, but it came to me in one of my ceremonial visions, and it was really interesting how it showed up. But the little seed pods showed up in my vision, and they scared the hell out of me, because the way snapdragons seed pods dry up when the flowers die off is they look like little skulls.
Mhm.
So those showed up in one of my visions, and yeah, I was banishing. I'm like, get out of here, get out of here. I didn't know what they were until I was just reading a book on just random plants. This is probably a year ago, and my ceremony was like 2 years ago that I saw this vision. And I found out what I actually saw was snapdragon seed pods. And then when I looked into it a little deeper, and yes, they're beautiful, but they have like, I think they originated in Italy and Spain is what I read. And it's actually a plant for protection. So with that being said, I grew a whole bunch this spring in the backyard, and yeah, so, but I just wanted to know like if there was any goddesses tied to that specific plant or not, or any info on it.
Not that I know of, but if you find out, please report back, because that sounds really interesting. Because I
It
don't know.
was super interesting, because if you ever look them up, like, yeah, the seed pods look like little brown skulls, and there's reason why. Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, because I mean, I've even saved the seed pods off of the seeds just to plant. Sometimes I actually have a couple that pop back up in the yard just from planting them in the garden, but I've never just never worked with it in that way, or really looked up any of the history, or if there's any kind of like indigenous traditions or anything that have worked with it. I mean, that would probably be a good place to start, to see if there's any, indigenous or esoteric traditions that have some kind of connection with them.
Mm-hmm.
See how it's been used previously. That might start to give you a place to, especially figure out exactly what part and all of that, and make sure that it's safe to how to.
Yeah, not to ingest or anything. It was just the only thing that I was able to find on it is that it's a plant for protection. So
It's just wanting to grow in your yard then and keep you safe.
yeah, I guess. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Always fun to learn new things about other plants that we don't know. Anybody else? Any other questions or anything you'd like to share with everybody? Everybody feels good?
I have another question. What about psilocybin?
As far as a goddess?
Um, yeah, and like, I don't think that there's really a feminine side or a masculine side to psilocybin, just because like it's known for being called the what is it, the holy children, I believe. But is there anything based with psilocybin with connected to any goddesses or gods or?
I mean, we definitely often refer to them as a they, because it's one of the few that it feels multiple for sure, like you said.
Okay. Yep.
I mean, I don't know if there's maybe like a group of goddesses, maybe something like the muses, or like associating like something like the Pleiades, like something that else that was like a group of that nature. Maybe.
Okay. Makes
Would
sense.
be an idea. The muses maybe because they are really kind of playful,
Makes sense.
creative, and a lot of people use microdosing too for helping them be creative. So maybe something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Anyone else? We still got a little time if anybody has any questions or anything. Everybody's good. All right. Well, thank you all again for showing up here and for all of your great questions and just being wonderful people here in our tribe. Like I said, if anybody would like to work with me, the first 5 of you can have a 20% discount on whatever service that you choose. So that will be available. And I believe Kat is also going to send this recording out to everybody too. So you will have that to hold on to if you want to go back and look through the exercises or anything else. So thank you all for being here and enjoy the rest of your evenings, everybody. Much love, guys.